the Mars Volta self-titled album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this latest album from the Mars Volta. This may be my most anticipated album of the year. Just gonna start by saying that. I have been waiting patiently, more than patiently. The Mars Volta, El Paso-based progressive rock, psychedelic rock, experimental rock icons born out of the ashes of seminal post-hardcore act at the Drive-In. Let me take you back a few steps. When I was 13, freaking 13, and I'm old now, I heard Deloused in the Comatorium, and at the time, I was not into indie, I was over rap, and I was so bored with modern alternative rock, and this album blew my goddamn mind. The intense performances, the lavish instrumentals, the insane concepts behind this album. All I knew is that I wanted more, and I wanted it very soon, and I got that with their follow-up, Francis the Mute. And if you don't know this, I put out my list of, my 100 favorite albums of all time every couple of years or so, and every time Francis the Mute is in my top 15 albums of all time. It is an album that I have puzzled over. It is an album that I have obsessed over. It confused the hell out of me, but I was still absolutely mesmerized by it, and it still holds up. It's easily one of my favorite albums of all time. It's where they went with the next few albums that kind of upset me. I mean, Ambutexture had great moments, some cool ideas, the Bedlam and Goliath as well, some pretty okay ideas from here and there. But overall, I worried that the Mars Volta was becoming a little directionless. While there were very good ideas throughout, and there was still nothing really else like them at the time, I thought that what made their first few releases as well as their debut EP so good was a cohesive thought. These were wild ideas, lavish instrumentals, intense performances, all leading to one thought, and I didn't get that from Ambutexture and the Bedlam and Goliath. So much so that I don't think I even listened to Octahedron for like 3 years after it came out. And it's a shame because, while not perfect, I thought it was pretty accessible at points, and once again had some pretty cool concepts. But I wasn't like blown away. The Mars Volta had really cooled off in my mind. But that's why I was so shocked that the last time we heard from them with Nocturnicat, I really thought that they got back in a good groove. This seemed to be a rebirth for the band, with a heavy use of synthesizers for a real center of their music, as well as an oddly human, emotional approach to it. I loved the album so much, I was just, waiting for the next step, and then shortly after, they broke up, they did some reunion shows. I did not think we would be getting another Mars Volta album, but here we are, 10 years later, with a group of singles that had me scratching my head for the direction of this album, confusing me, perplexing me, and I listened to the album a bunch of times, and my thoughts on this thing are very complicated. I honestly think this is probably one of the hardest albums I've had to review all year. This album starts off with Blacklight Shrine, and right off the bat, I'm just gonna be honest, this is not the album that I expected to hear. This is a surprisingly funky, sort of laid-back start. It's warm, it's groovy, it's actually surprisingly hip sounding, and I don't know, I've always really loved hearing Cedric sing in Spanish, no matter what group or if he's performing on his own. And this album, it's stylistically pretty out there and hard to pinpoint, but for the moment I actually really love the songwriting and the performances. While this album is far from perfect, it's not what I expected either. I don't think that's a bad thing. Graveyard Love, on the other hand, is much weirder, very left field. I love Cedric's very weird, very alien-sounding vocal performance that's still actually really cool, and oddly, even more so, really soulful. It reminds me of his performances on Nocturnicat. The campy synths, the melodic songwriting, this is actually one of the best tracks here. And as far as the deep cut goes, look no further than Shore Story. This track is so good. I love how smoky and just how visual it is. Really soulful once again. That's something that goes along with a lot of this album, all while remaining pretty futuristic, pretty spacey, pretty out there. I don't know what it is about this track and Cedric's performance, but he sounds mesmerizing here. Even if this track and this album is a little straightforward, I'm not pissed at tracks like this. I really do love Blank Condolences too. It's very mysterious. I love the pacing on this one, the way this track creeps along. It's freakish, it's very strange, it's got some really off-kilter grooves once again. It's intoxicating and really soulful, though. It's definitely just a real shot out of left field. And oh god, I'm gonna butcher this track. My Spanish is not good. Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and read it off my computer. Que Dios te Maldiga mi Corazón. Yeah, it's a really great track as well. I actually really love the Latin flair to a lot of the tracks on this album, especially this one. It's something that the album actually does really well. It just, it's obviously something that anything that Cedric has touched down upon in the past has tried at one point on one album or another, but it still seems pretty hip and fresh and new sounding. It's got a great groove to it, and while I still worry that this is just a little straightforward, I don't think it's a badly wrote tune at all. It's actually really catchy. But there are moments on this album, and plenty of them, where I worry that this is just too much of a departure for the Mars Volta, and I just really can't wrap my head around it. With Vigil, this is where things get disappointing and downright weird. When I first heard this as a single, my initial reaction was, what the hell is this? And I didn't judge it at first. My initial thoughts was, it's okay, but I need to hear the rest of the album, and now I have heard the rest of the album, and I still really don't know what to do with it. The thing is, though, I actually feel really bad because Cedric's vocal performance on this track, the guy hasn't lost a step. But just as this album rolls on, these lackluster, very straightforward instrumentals are catching up to me very quickly. Cerulean is not really that exciting either, sadly. I do like Cedric's vocals once again. Not for nothing, the guy sounds pretty on point. His vocal effect work here is pretty cool too. But this is just so far from where we started with the band. This just sounds like the Mars Volta's answer to dad rock, which is really scary. And you know what, these little blemishes on the album are sticking out more and more of a sore thumb. God, I would love for some color or some energy here right now. On the other hand, no case gain. Maybe one of the most phoned in tracks from the Mars Volta I've ever heard. What the hell are these call and return group vocals? So cheesy. And this instrumental, it's not terrible, but it's just so average. I actually like some of the drum fills. Those are cool, but I don't know about you guys, but I just know that they could do so much better than this. Tourmaline, it's not the worst sin committed here, but it's a track that I have so many mixed feelings on. I love the whisper quiet vocals and how haunted this track sounds, but this melody is so average that once again, I am begging for a little bit of oomph. I'm begging for any wild shift or a sharp left turn. These instrumentals, a lot of them, if you look close enough, have the bare bones of something so cool, but they don't go the full mile. Collapsible Shoulders isn't that good either. And while I said it earlier that Cedric sounds good overall, this is easily his biggest sin committed here as far as his vocals go. This track is goofy, it is tough to get through, and it's one of the shortest tracks here too. There are some later cool tracks. Flashburns from Flashbacks, I think it's a really cool late album tune. This is a spacey, synthy jam that would have really found its home very nicely on Nocturnicate. Cedric's performance is fantastic as well, and lyrically, one of the oddest things that we get here, and honestly is so odd that it sounds like home for the Mars Volta. And Palmful of Crux is by far the most emotional and heartfelt track here. I love how downtrodden and just heartbroken Cedric sounds. You feel this. And the woodwind surrounding him at all angles just gives this track so much depth. This is what I've been craving. I wasn't expecting such a bluesy affair on this album, but it actually comes off really well here. It's also really beautiful in its own sort of delicate way. Equus 3 is a track that I wish that we got a little bit more of. This track is a real sharp left turn. It's bulky as hell. I love the synth work here. The production is slick, and Cedric sounds... man, he just sounds sleazy and dangerous. There's such a feeling of mystery to this track. I wish we heard more of this. Also, once again, great production risks, great use of vocal effects. Where has this been? If we got more like this, I think I would have enjoyed this album more. As far as the deep cut goes, maybe the best track here. And the Requisition as a finale is really impressive. But this overall, as an album, is such a hard album for me to rate. You know, hearing the singles confused me, but hearing the album as a whole confuses me even more. While there's great moments with each passing track, the Mars Volta get a little further from what made them so great in the early 2000s. I mean, the Requisition has some off-kilter licks, a great groove, and some of Cedric's weirdest and wildest performances on this entire album. It's a great finale. I just wish this album had some more direction to it after all these years. 10 years it's been. And we're getting an album that has some really good ideas, but you gotta look really close. There's a lot of instrumentals that sound really average from a distance, and if you look really close, have some great elements and some great ideas going on in them. There's some great soulful performances. There's some really awesome songwriting in here. But at the end of the day, is this a cohesive thought? It's not. And that is kind of really a letdown for me, at least. This is one of the hardest albums I've had to review all year. For right now, I'm feeling a strong 6 on this album, but let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.